I recently got the chance to stay at the Inn at 500, located in the heart of downtown Boise. With complimentary drinks at check-in and spacious luxe penthouses and suites, it's an ideal spot for celebrations and your visitors. It was the perfect place for me and my husband to sneak away for a little staycation. We loved the cozy fireplace in our room and the balcony with gorgeous views of the city skyline, where we shared coffee in the morning. Ready to plan an unforgettable Boise stay? Book now at innat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise, let's be real, we're probably all doom scrolling too much, and one of the best cures for that is getting outside. Late autumn camping can actually be one of the best times to set up a tent under the stars, if you know how to do it. That's why we're resharing my conversation with contributor Heath Druzin, who has expert insider tips on fall camping. It's Tuesday, November 12th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. So people usually think of camping as a summer activity. I know that I do, but I've heard that you're a big fan of camping in the fall. Why is that?
Oh, yeah. I think fall is actually like the prime time to camp.
Really?
Absolutely. The two biggest things for me about fall are weather and crowds. So you've got cooler weather. It also tends to be pretty dry in the fall. So you tend to get some pretty nice weather. If you don't mind a little chilly wake up, especially, it's great. And,
Okay.
That's what your sleeping bag's for. But the biggest thing is there's just fewer people out there. What a lot of us love about Idaho is that it's not a very crowded state.
Mm-hmm.
But especially post-pandemic, in the summertime, it can get kind of crowded at campgrounds out in the mountains. So I find that fall, people already their mindset's changing. They're not thinking about camping as much. Kids are back in school. One other thing is, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but wildlife is on the move, and you tend to have a better chance to see some wildlife out there too in the fall.
Oh, I guess I hadn't thought about that, but that does make sense. When it's, 105 degrees, they're hiding out too because it's way too hot for them. I know that in the summer when I've tried to reserve camping sites, it can be really competitive. Like, get on those websites, get your spot reserved as quickly as possible. Is fall camping the same way? Do you need to make sure and reserve a spot, or could someone maybe be more spontaneous and just kind of drive around and see what's available?
Generally, I would historically say you really don't need to book in the fall, especially as you get later in the fall. But there's two things that give me pause these days.
Okay.
The main thing is post-pandemic, everything just seems to be a little bit busier. People seem to be a little more mobile. So if you're going to a popular place, especially like Sawtooth, for example, in the fall, and you have a particular place in mind that's bookable, then I would book it.
Yeah.
The other thing you always have to be careful of later in the fall is hunting season.
Mm.
So once you get into hunting season, and it's worth checking the Fish and Game site to see kind of where it begins, then you do start getting some places that fill up. And you might be surprised, like you'll get to some place and you're like, why are all these people there? And they look like they're set up for like 2 weeks, and they are, because like some guys will take off a lot of time for hunting. So
yeah,
be careful
serious
of that.
about it.
They're really serious about it. Yeah. Now, the caveat to that is if you are comfortable with wild camping, or what is officially known as dispersed camping.
What is that?
So that is really, it's as simple as just camping outside of a reservable campground. So if you go into national forest land, if you're on a Forest Service road or a BLM road, in general, unless it's signed otherwise, unless there's signs that say no camping here, you can go camp kind of wherever you want.
I had no idea. I thought you had to stay in the campgrounds.
You do not have to stay in the campgrounds. And what's even cooler is a lot of places in Idaho will actually have these like sort of unofficial campsites. It's not in a campground, but you're like, look to the side and there's a little driveway and it's like flattened out. Sometimes there's a fire ring. Sometimes there's even a picnic bench. And it's it's made to be a campground, but it's not on a map as, blah, blah, blah campground. It's first come, first serve, and they can be great. But you can also, if you're adventurous, you can go down a Forest Service road and just kind of look for a good spot to camp.
Oh, so there's a lot more potential options depending on how adventurous you're feeling about your camping.
Yeah. And a lot of them are not I'm not talking about going bushwhacking in a really remote spot. This is just going down some Forest Service roads and keeping an eye out. And sometimes you can find some real gems that way.
So, Heath, for someone who lives in Boise, who's more of a camping novice, asking for a friend, where would you recommend as an overnight fall camping spot? Just, heading out maybe Friday after work or Saturday afternoon, just one night. Where would you recommend people go?
No, that's great. And Boise's so well set up for that because within a 2-hour drive, you have a lot of options. And some of your easiest options are up Highway 21. And you can look them up before you go online. You can do some pretty general searches that'll find Forest Service campgrounds on 21. And if you're paying attention when you're driving, you'll see the signs, right? It's a little brown sign that has a tent on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have names like classic Western campground names like Bad Bear, 10 Mile, those kinds of campgrounds. There's one called Grayback Gulch, actually, by Idaho City, that I really like and I think flies a little under the radar. And there's a bunch of other campgrounds around there, but Idaho City's an hour from Boise. And when you go back into some of those campsites, like Grayback Gulch, you really feel remote without actually having to drive into a remote place. It's a lot of easily accessible campgrounds. And then Banks Loman Road, which is how you get to Garden Valley, that road has some pretty cool campsites too. It's got good campgrounds within an hour and a half from Boise, and you can either go past Garden Valley and on the kind of the main Banks Loman Road and find them, or what's kind of cool if you want to drive just a little bit more is if you go left to a little town called Crouch.
Okay.
You go past Crouch. You can stop at the Dirty Shane, a great named bar and burger place, and fuel up before you go into the backcountry. But you keep going past Crouch, and there's a ton of campgrounds down that road and some hot springs. And it's another cool place where you really don't have to go very far from Boise, maybe an hour and a half. And you just find these beautiful forested campgrounds. There's a river that runs through there. I believe it's the Middle Fork of the Payette. And yeah, there's hot springs, there's woods, there's mountains. It's gorgeous and it's easy and good roads. I'm not sending anyone to 4x4 roads here. These are places that anyone with a car can get to.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Isn't the point of traveling to get away from it all? To feel the best you've ever felt? Then maybe you should check out Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool, white, sandy beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll meet locals brimming with gratitude for an island that redefines what a paradise can be. When your trip comes to an end, you won't need another vacation because you just had the vacation. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at Aruba.com.
Heath, one issue that I found while I've been trying to get more into outdoor activities around here is that people gatekeep the really good spots. So what's your take on sharing suggestions for outdoor spots versus keeping the best places a secret?
Well, Lindsay, am I going to tell you my secret campsite near Stanley that nobody knows about and I can reliably go camp alone in the middle of July? No.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I'm okay with that.
It's a fine line, right?
Yes.
So I think people can go way overboard with the gatekeeping. And I think you should welcome new people and help them out. And I think in general, I like the spirit in Idaho where people do want to help you. And I want to default to that in general. But where I think it kind of gets destructive is like there's some Facebook sites and some other sites online where people are just sort of like throwing it all out there and making it like, it's just where people go where they don't want to like actually work for any information. And I do think that can be destructive. I'm thinking of a particular Facebook hot spring site I'm not going to name because I don't want to push anybody there. These places can't take that much pressure, right? Like you gotta make people work a little bit for it. So I guess I fall a little in the squishy middle there where I'm like, I think when people ask for help and they're nice, you should help them in general, but you should be a little bit careful about how you share information. And I do think you should be cagey online.
Yeah, I was say I won't ask you maybe your top 3 hot spring spots, your secret most hot spring spots. And I can totally understand people wanting to protect maybe, their camping site that they're like, this is where I want to go. I want to know it's available. I think the tricky thing has been that we've camped at a couple places. People give us like a general idea and we're like, these aren't necessarily great spots. We know there's better spots. We just don't know how to find them. And then people get real cagey. And I'm like, I don't want to take your personal spot, but I do want to like have a good experience. If we're going out here, we're taking the kids, like I want to make sure it's a fun experience. And so, it's just kind of a weird culture with the gatekeeping and who will share things and who won't. So it's just really interesting.
Yeah, be kind, people. Don't go too crazy with that. If Lindsay comes up to you and asks for a nice suggestion, like, come on, help her out.
I'm just gonna go like one weekend a year. Just I promise I won't take your spot all the time. So another tricky thing when we're getting into camping is the gear. And I really struggle with knowing what do I need to buy? Like what is necessary? Because some of this equipment is really, really expensive. And if I don't really need it, I'm not hardcore. I don't necessarily want to get it. So what is absolutely necessary or what maybe even is also worth a splurge?
That's a great question. And I'll break it up a little because car camping and backpacking are 2 very different things, right? Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of people, especially beginners, are going to be car camping. All that means is you drive to the campground, you set up your tent. You don't have to hike to your campsite. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of fun. It's super convenient. And you don't need that much gear. However, one thing that you need is a reliable tent. And by reliable, I mean one that's not going to blow away. And very importantly, that's waterproof. Because even in our high desert climate, especially in the mountains, you never know when a thunderstorm is going to roll through. And if you're not waterproof, you are suffering. You're probably not in your tent anymore. Then you're sleeping in your car, and that's not nearly as fun.
No.
But you don't have to spend an arm and a leg on a tent. And I will say, you can get some very good tents for $150 or less. One thing that you definitely need camping, which is not expensive, is a headlamp. Bring a headlamp because you're going to be bumping around in the dark. There's rocks on the ground. You got to get to the outhouse potentially. That little headlamp is a key piece of gear, and you can get one for like $15 and like a good one. That
will definitely be an upgrade from my cell phone light that I've been using.
Yes. And the great thing is your cell phone light, you're using up your hand there, right? Mm-hmm. You can be hands-free. It's much better. And it's just a better light. And get a camp chair, another cheap item. You don't have to spend a lot on a camp chair, but it's so much nicer to sit around the campfire on a chair than, like trying to find a rock or a log. A cooler, again, you can get it cheap. You just get a Coleman cooler, but treat yourself. You're camping out in the woods, like bring some nice food, grill it up if you can. So that brings you to, it depends, you can go, you don't have to have hot food. Obviously you can do what you want. But it's nice to have a cook stove and you can get a Coleman stove. That's what I've got. I mean, you can go crazy and spend a ton of money, but like you can get a Coleman stove and spend very little money. And a word to the wise, ice is messy and it's expensive to keep buying ice. Get a few freezer packs and then you've got like you got a fridge on the go. Your food isn't getting all soggy. Like these are like little things, but it makes a huge difference. And so for car camping, I'd say that's the essential. If you're backpacking, the one big thing that you have to add to that is a water filter.
Yeah.
Those are my big ones.
Okay. I think that is a good list to focus on and get started with. And one of the perks of fall camping is getting to see the gorgeous foliage. Where are some of the best spots if someone's wanting to camp surrounded by the picturesque fall leaves?
Yeah, there's a few places. Just keep in mind, Idaho's a little bit monochrome. It's mostly yellow, but it's very pretty in spots. But, it's not going to be like the East Coast fall colors.
Yeah.
But when paired with the much bigger mountains in the East Coast, I would say that it's pretty nice. So the best spot I would say within a weekend distance of Boise is the Wood River Valley. Hopefully people won't get mad at me for saying this, but it's not a secret. And there are a couple really nice campgrounds on the far edge of the Wood River Valley on the way out to Stanley off Highway 75. I do find that those aren't too crowded, especially in the fall. And there's some really nice fall colors just right there around those campgrounds. There's a little tip. If you're a fly fisherman, you're in a place that people travel from around the country to go fishing, and fall's a great time for that too. So Wood River Valley, that'd be number one. The Sawtooths have some pretty nice aspen colors. It's a little bit farther away, but again, totally reasonable weekend trip. And you can even do a loop. You can go Sun Valley and then loop around to Stanley and come back to Boise, and you'll see quite a lot of nice aspen colors on that loop.
Oh yeah, that would be a good weekend. Hit them both up, and yeah, that sounds great. Okay, Heath, you also mentioned that wildlife is much more active in the fall. You're more likely to see some animals when you're camping in the fall. What in our region could people expect to see?
Perhaps the best place to see elk in the fall and winter is actually the closest kind of mountain place to Boise, and that's Garden Valley. If you go the Banks Loman Road, you go up 55 and you take a right on the Banks Loman Road, you get to a little town called Garden Valley, and there's this big, wide valley on the right side, and elk really congregate there. And often you see pretty big herds, and it's cool. Now you see them on both sides of the road, and you can go past Garden Valley, and you can see them in a little bit more of a wild setting out there in the woods. There's some nice vistas that overlook open valleys. You've got the Payette River running through there. But that corridor, a ton of deer and elk. You often see wild turkeys out there. I've gone hunting for turkeys out there, and I've seen them. I've never actually got one. They just like to taunt you. But if you're wildlife watching, that's what you want to see, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So Garden Valley's great. And Garden Valley, that town, it's just a little more than an hour from Boise. And if you continue along that road, you can have some really good wildlife spotting less than 2 hours away. And even if you're just feeling really unambitious and just kind of want to do a little drive and get some lunch, it's a great road for that. And it's an easy day trip.
Perfect.
And then if you want to go further up into the mountains, if you keep going up 21, like between Loman and Stanley, I see elk there all the time. So those are kind of the big close by places where if you got your eyes peeled, you got a good chance. And
with more wildlife, what are some things that people should keep in mind to be safe and thoughtful while camping in the fall? Yeah, well, first of all, just, slow down on the road and keep your eyes out, because obviously you don't want to run into an elk or a deer, and they certainly don't want you to either. No. But the big thing, the other animal that's on the move is bears. Now, you're not very likely to see a bear. I've seen a few in Idaho, but that's a rarer sighting. But what you have to be aware of in the Sawtooths right now is that you got to hang your food. If you're car camping, you can just keep your food in your car, but never, ever have food in your tent. Obviously, if you're out and you're cooking and you're eating, that's fine. But once you're finished, get it all in your car and don't have anything in your tent that smells like food. And mint is food, so don't have toothpaste in your tent. Think about it. Yep. Just don't do it. If you're in the Sawtooths, especially, it's a rule because they've had some rogue bears that have been raiding people's coolers and stuff.
And you don't want that because you don't want a bear that close to you. But it's also a lot of times those bears get killed. They get euthanized because they're habituated to people. So like it's a serious thing for you, for the bear. That's the really huge one. Just be bear aware, as they say.
And something else I want to touch on before we end, I definitely would want to camp somewhere where there's hot springs or hot springs relatively nearby. So what would be some good locations where I'd be in a nice camping spot and pretty close to some good hot springs?
Okay, so obviously this is a place where I might gatekeep a little bit, but...
You're going to tell me after the show, right? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll even tell you on the show. There's some good places that are not secrets that in the fall, especially, I think you can get some solitude. So if you go to Garden Valley, that road, Banks Loman again, if you go past it, there's a couple campgrounds that have hot springs right there. Pine Flats is one of them, where you've got hot springs right on the river. And one campground is called Hot Springs Campground. And I think the story is it's got like kind of a concrete tub right by the river. And I think it actually was like an official bathhouse back in the early 20th century. Oh. So like there's little historical things that are cool. One that's a little farther afield, but only about a little more than 2 hours away, so very doable for a weekend, is Bonneville Hot Springs. I love Bonneville. I think it's awesome. People know about it, so you're not going to be alone. But in the fall, you might have fewer people. You might have a little solitude, and it's just a gorgeous setting. And you have to hike a mile in to get to the hot springs, so that keeps some of the people away. You can't drive up to it. And they have a lot of cool pools that are, again, right on the river. So those are three of the easiest wild hot springs. There's some other developed hot springs where you pay a fee and you can go into, but those are the best camping hot springs close to Boise that I'm willing to tell you. And they are nice. And I like them. Yeah. I go to these places. even as a sort of like secret keeper. I like these places.
Well, thank you for sharing those with us, not gatekeeping those locations too.
No problem. And Lindsay, I hope you get out there and do some camping and enjoy it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, you should check out our website, boise.citycast.fm, for our guide to other activities you need to check out in November. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a look at how Trump's campaign promises could affect Idaho.